We are good to go. Thank you.
All right. It is 5:30 p.m. on Thursday, September 17th, and I'd like to call to order today's Zoning Advisory Committee meeting. And I would like to introduce and invite Vice Chair Adriana Publico to do roll call.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Christine Howe.
Present.
Polly Boardman.
Present.
Malia Pakta.
Present.
Thank you. Christy Essa.
Present.
Dallas Halsey.
Present.
Natalie Geisels.
Present.
Amy Howe.
Present.
Kaylyn Campbell.
Present.
Christine Swanson. Katie Coombs. Araceli Martinez.
Present.
Adriana Publico, present. Beth Smith.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much. So now we'll move on to item 1.03, public comment. Kendall, have we received any public comment? In this particular area of public comment, we usually invite comment not related to any agenda items later on in the meeting. So Kendall, do we have any comment?
Public comment from Kelly Janine, or Janine Kelly, my apologies, Liz Cornelia, and Pablo Duran.
All right, we'll take a moment as a committee and we'll review that public comment before moving on. Kendall, I know that you had sent some of the public comment beforehand. Is the additional public comment coming through?
I'm trying to get it to send right now. My apologies. It might be a few minutes. It was saying what a good job we're doing.
Neil, would you advise us to move on or pause until we can get that public comment?
We can move on. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next item, item 1.04. This is the action to adopt today's agenda. So we'll go ahead and we'll review that together as a group. Is there any discussion or recommended change to the order that we have for today? Seeing no comments, I will accept a motion to adopt.
I move that we adopt the agenda as proposed.
I need your name.
Second.
Adriana Publico, for the record, I move that we adopt the agenda as proposed.
Is there a
Christine
second?
Hull, second.
Is there any
Christine.
discussion on the topic? No? All right. Seeing no additional comment, all those in favor, aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, motion carried. So now we'll move on to item or section 2, moving on to item 2.01, the introduction of the new members of the Zoning Advisory Committee. This is a very exciting topic, and we are so happy to welcome new members of the district and community to the Zoning Advisory Committee. And I'd like to give all of our members, when I call on you, an opportunity to say hello and share a little bit about yourselves for the members of the community. First, I would like to welcome Malia Pakta.
I'm Malia Pakta. I'm a mom with 3 girls in the district, one in elementary, one in middle school, and one in high school. And I am sitting in on the appointment of Trustee Caudill.
Thank you very much, Malia. And now I'd like to invite Christy Essa.
Hi, I'm Christy Essa. I have one daughter in elementary school and 2 nephews that I'm very close with. One is also in elementary and one is in middle school. I'm a nurse and have lived in Reno almost my entire life.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you being with us. And next up, we have Dallas Halsey.
Hi everyone, I'm Dallas Holsey. I am your certified educator representative here on the board. I've got 6 years of middle school science teaching experience, and I really love my job.
Thanks, Dallas. And then next up is Natalie Gassells.
Everyone, my name is Natalie Gassells. I grew up in Reno and was educated all through the Washoe County school system up until graduating from the University of Nevada, Reno. I have 2 kids here in elementary school at Huntsberger, and I am currently working at UPS in sales management, and I would be sitting under Trustee Scott Kelly for the seat for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. And now Amy Howe.
I'm Amy Howe, and I am here as the administrator for the school district. And I've been with the district for 16 years. I'm currently the assistant principal at Dodson Elementary School. I've been an administrator at Risley Elementary School, and I've taught 2nd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, and I've been an instructional coach. I've been a dean. Been lots of things. I've had 2 kids go through the Washoe County School District, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
And we're happy to have you. And that brings us to Kaylyn Campbell.
Hi, my name is Kaylyn Campbell. I currently am an 8th grade science teacher at Desert Skies Middle School. In the winter, I graduated through the Nevada Leads program for my administrative degree, and just finished the Washoe Academy of School Leadership in the spring.
Fantastic. And we're also very excited to welcome to our first meeting our new district liaison, Area Superintendent Lauren Ford. Lauren, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everybody. I'm Lauren Ford. I'm Area Superintendent for Area 4, and I will be your staff liaison this year. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Kendall, was there any public comment on this section?
There is no public comment. Thank you.
Fantastic. We'll go ahead and we'll close that out and then move on to item 2.02, the discussion and possible action to select a chair of the Zoning Advisory Committee for a term ending June 30th, 2021 from the current membership. And I will turn this item over to Area Superintendent Ford.
Thank you, Beth. So at this time, we will need to select a chair for the Zoning Advisory Committee. Any committee member may be considered for the position of chair. I do want to let the committee know that Beth has done an outstanding job in her role as chair. She's a great communicator, and I believe she is interested in continuing in the role if the committee so desires. Just briefly, the role of chair helps with the development of agendas, meets with the staff liaison, leads the community members and our meetings, and debriefs with different community members at times. So at this time, I will accept nominations for anyone who is interested in the position of chair of the Zoning Advisory Committee.
Polly Boardman, I nominate Beth Smith for the chair of the Zoning Advisory Committee.
Is there a second? Right? Don't I have to do that, Neil?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what you could do is ask.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Neil.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
Oh, I was going to second. Christine Hull, I second that nomination for Beth Smith to be the chair of the Zoning Advisory Committee.
Just ask if there's any other nominations.
Is there any other nominations at this time?
Okay. Seeing none, ask for a vote.
Seeing that there are no other nominations for chair, I'd like to take a vote at this time. Those in favor of Beth Smith remaining as chair of the Zoning Advisory Committee, please say yes.
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 Yes. Any no's? Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to congratulate Beth. Thank you, Beth, for continuing on as our chair for the Zoning Advisory Committee. We are very excited to continue having you as chair, and you may continue with the agenda.
Thank you. It's like the only awkward agenda item that there is all year for me, but I sincerely appreciate it. I've spoken to many of you, and I mean it very sincerely when I say that outside of being a mother and a wife, this has been the most rewarding thing that I've ever been a part of. And it's sincerely an honor to be a part of this group and to be recognized in this way. So thank you so much. On that note, we will move to item 2.03. This is the discussion and possible action to select a vice chair of the Zoning Advisory Committee for a term ending June 30th. I think this is supposed to be 2021 from the current membership. And as Area Superintendent Ford mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about what the role of the vice chair is. So we did see Adriana just a moment ago take the roll call. Whether in a virtual format or in person, that is a traditional role within the vice chair. When we do our meetings in person, or if we have special guests that attend, we also acknowledge those dignitaries in the room. The vice chair is also responsible for the minutes. And so the district staff that initially takes the minutes would route them to you initially for review and approval. And you will add to them, work with them, make sure that they're refined in the way that you feel is accurate. And then those ultimately become the minutes that get sent out to the committee for review and approval and a possible adoption. In addition to that, I invite the vice chair to be as involved as he or she would like to be in terms of helping to develop the materials over the course of each month, being a part of the meetings, really understand what's happening in the background and as things evolve over the course of the year. So on that note, I do know that Adriana Publico is interested in rejoining the committee as a traditional member, but I do want to invite the opportunity for her to speak for what her year has been like as the vice chair, as that may affect some decisions moving forward.
Thank you, Beth. I really did enjoy working as vice chair this past year, and I want to offer that opportunity to somebody else because Beth is wonderful and represents us so well in all of the ways that Lauren mentioned, but also to the Board of Trustees at least twice a year and maybe 3 times this year. And I think that that's a great opportunity for some of our committee members who are employees who are looking to be more visible in the organization, especially with the leadership. So given that, am I allowed to make a nomination?
You should probably wait for somebody else to nominate you, unless you're going to.
No, not me. I don't want to do it, Neil. That's what I just said.
Yes, you may nominate somebody else. Yes, of course. I thought you were going to nominate yourself. I was like, that's probably not the best way to do it. My mistake. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so I would like to nominate Kaylyn Campbell as vice chair of the Zoning Advisory Committee for the upcoming year.
Does anyone have any questions about what we shared about the role, or like any additional clarifying information? If not, then is there a second to Kaylyn's nomination?
Polly Boardman, I second.
Is there any discussion on the topic that anyone would like to talk about? If not, seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. All right, motion carried. Congratulations, Kaylyn.
Thank you guys so much. I'm super humbled to take the position.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you being open to that, and it'll definitely be a great year. All right, moving on now to item 2.04. This is an item for possible action to approve the minutes of the March 12th, 2020 Zoning Advisory Committee meeting. This is, again, an item for possible action. So we'll pull up those minutes. There's quite a bit here. For those that were there in person, you'll remember that this was quite a meeting. So hopefully everyone's had the chance to review them. We're very much open to comment. Were there any changes or any questions that anyone had? No? All right, seeing no discussion, I will accept a motion to adopt the minutes.
Adriana Publico for the record, I make a motion to adopt the minutes.
Is there a
March
second?
12th, 2020.
Christine Hull, I second the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, now we will move on to some more of the content for today. 2.05, the presentation for the Washoe County School District Office of General Counsel on Nevada's open meeting law. This refers to Nevada Revised Statutes 241, the requirements for public bodies. This is for information and presentation only. And we welcome Chief Counsel Neil Rombardo.
Great, thank you, Chairwoman Smith and members of the Zoning Committee. How are you all doing tonight? I hope well. You don't have to answer that. So we're going to go quickly through the open meeting law. I'm going to give you a trimmed down version, what our office has identified as important concepts for you all to understand. If you want to get more in depth with the open meeting law, there is, if you're bored, feel free to jump online and check out the Attorney General's website. We put a link in this memo that Adam put up. Thank you, Adam. And that'll give you a complete rundown of the decisions of the Office of the Attorney General for the state of Nevada, as well as the law itself. However, I don't necessarily think that's required. And that's what we're here for, to support you. And you have Beth, who's become quite versed at the open meeting law, and most staff know the basics. And Lauren, we're working together to get her up to speed on this stuff. So between all of us at the district, we can definitely help you and manage any open meeting law situation. Let me start by saying that on behalf of Superintendent McNeil and the leadership team and myself, thank you for volunteering and thank you for being here. And the board, and on behalf of the board too, I guess I technically can't speak for them, but I do know the other people I can. But anyway, the board takes volunteer committees such as yourself very seriously and tend to follow your recommendations. And they really, really, really appreciate you being here. So I wanted to start with that, as our memo does as well. So let's go through the memo quickly. And if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt. Because of the way the screen is right now, with Adam having the document up, which I really appreciate, I can only see a limited number of you. So if you don't put your hand up, because that's not going to do me any good. So just feel free to jump in and ask any questions you may have. So just remember that you are a public body by law, which is found in NRS 241.010 is the definitions of the open meeting law. And basically, a public body is defined as any group of individuals who come together in a collegial body to make decisions or recommendations to another body that disperses tax dollars and is supported by tax dollars. You are supported by tax dollars, the Washoe County School District. You have come together to make decisions on zoning laws as they are zoning regulations and policies as they relate to the Washoe County School District, and you make recommendations to the Board of Trustees, who by law are the ultimate decision makers on zoning. So that makes you a public body and makes you subject to Nevada's open meeting law. And so let's go through some of those things that you should be aware of. We can't hold a meeting unless there's a quorum. So a quorum of the board is more than 50%. So 50% want to do it. And I forget how many are on the zoning committee. Is it 11? I was looking at that earlier. If it's 11, 13. Okay, so 13 members. So you have to have 7 to conduct a meeting. I know that in several public bodies throughout the state, they will hold meetings in less than a quorum and allow people to speak and kind of discuss items. We will not be doing that. I don't recommend that. I think that can lead to violations of the open meeting law. And so if there's not a quorum, the meeting will be canceled. Even if everyone shows up, I think it's in the best interest of everyone to cancel the meeting. So
but Neil, if we're doing an in-person meeting and people call in, they still count toward a quorum, right?
Yep, I was going to get to that.
Oh,
yep.
sorry.
You may. That's okay. No problem. You may. I appreciate your assistance, Adriana. Thank you. you can attend meetings in any number of ways, such as we're doing right now, Zoom. But even if we were all in the same place at a gym or a theater or any place like that, and a member calls in, that's considered attending the meeting, as long as they can hear and participate. So if the phone, if you get disconnected or something of that nature, text us and let us know, and we can pause the meeting. Because the theory being that your vote is just as important as everyone else's vote, and you should be entitled to the same information as everyone else is entitled to. And this format is a little more difficult for us to present to you, obviously, because of Zoom and COVID and all of the ramifications of that. These meetings will go better when we are all together and in public, and it's a little bit easier to manage. So I know for those of you who volunteered, and this might be your first public body, again, thank you. And I know this might feel a little odd. This is not the way it's normally going to be. We're going to get back to the old normal instead of the new normal. So just hang in there. And again, we really thank you. So flipping on to page 2, I don't know, Adam, if you can do that on your. Thanks. So keep in mind, an action is a majority vote of those who are in attendance. So if you have 13 members and 7 show up, we have a quorum, we can have a meeting, and you can actually pass an item and decide somebody's zoning on 4, because 4 is a majority of 7. However, we hope that that's never the case. The board has selected 13 people for a reason, and they want to hear from all 13 people. So we really, really encourage you to attend whenever possible. And I know it's difficult, and if you have family situations, of course, that's always a priority, or health issues, of course, that's always a priority. But please try to make it to as many meetings as you can, because the board does rely upon you, and it's important for the community to have representation by everyone. So one thing that we did put as 3A, it's important to note that not one person on the committee can direct staff or take action on their own. And so sometimes public bodies fall in the habit of saying, members fall in the habit of saying, I would like to see this on the next agenda, or I want to do that, whatever it may be. Or Mr. Searcy, can you go look at this? We need to refrain from that, because that might be your opinion as a member of the zoning committee, but that might not be the entire committee's opinion. And so you'll see me a lot, I'll tell Beth, nope, we're not going to do that. We need to have a vote. And I say it privately between the two of us. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but the reason why we need to have a vote is we need to make sure that the entire public body wants us to go and do those steps, whatever they may be. So just keep in mind that you as an individual don't get to direct staff. Beth will work with Lauren as the liaison to create agendas, and that's the biggest part of an individual working with staff. But beyond that, your vote is no more important than anybody else's vote. That goes for every member, and you are all required to have a majority vote before you can direct staff to do anything. So I hope that makes sense. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free. It's hard because I can't read you guys. I can only see 4 of you. So it's hard to tell what's going on with all of you, but I hope this is coming out okay. Well, that's much better. Thank you, Adam. I guess I'll go with this. You all have the memo, right? Do you have the memo? Okay. All right, then we're good. That's way better. Thanks. So I think we've discussed votes and how votes work. I think we've discussed the quorum, what is required to have a meeting. Keep in mind that all of your meetings must be public. So here's the biggest takeaway from tonight is you need to be careful of what is called serial communications. If really, frankly, if you're going to violate the law, open meeting law, you're going to do so on accident, and you're going to do so, and this is how. You're going to start texting each other. And the next thing you know, you're going to text each other. And first it might be, and Beth, sorry, but you're the chair, so you get the first pick. Beth's going to text Adriana, who's going to text Kaylyn, who's going to text Polly, who's going to text Amy, who's going to text Natalie. How many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Who's going to text Dallas? So at that point, you have how many people on this text chain? 7. 7 is a quorum of the zoning committee. But I'm fairly certain you're not doing these texts in public, which is required by the open meeting law, because they're text. And at that point, if you, and oh, I guess I should have made this point. You can text each other about whatever you want, what you're having for dinner. I'm presuming you're texting about the zoning committee. And if you are texting about the zoning committee and you've gathered 7 of you together, then that's a quorum, and whatever you've discussed are what is called deliberations. And the open meeting law is very clear that all deliberations must occur in open in front of the public. There is only one exception to that, and that is when you're meeting with your attorney. So if for some reason I needed to meet with all of you in private, I can do that and you can deliberate, but that would be the only way. So keep that in mind, that that's how you're going to violate. Or you could do it using social media. So we strongly discourage social media, because what happens is Beth may say something, Polly decides she wants to weigh in, and then somebody else says something mean about Beth and Polly. So Malia gets upset and she wants to defend them, and to see what happens. So we really just have to be careful, and I will help you any way I can. So if you do have questions, I'm a little tougher, and Lauren's tough to get a hold of, but try either Lauren or myself. We can help you, but that's how you're going to end up doing. That's how you're going to end up violating the open meeting law. I know you won't do it intentionally. It'll be on accident. So if you're going to email each other, always, always, always BCC each other. This way it prevents people from hitting reply all. And the reply all is where we start getting in trouble, right? So you can do BCCs, because what's happening is you're not including everyone's thoughts in that communication, right? So you can have one-on-one communications. That's legal. You can actually have thoughts all the way up to 6, and that's legal. It's when you get over that quorum number. So that's where you got to be careful. Polly, do you have a question? Oh, okay. I saw your mute. I saw your mute like go off, so I wasn't sure. Adriana?
Yeah, point of clarification, Neil. I heard you give this kind of same speech to the Board of Trustees recently, I believe. And my understanding of that was like, it's okay for me to talk with Beth about a point on our agenda. And then it's okay for me to talk with Kaylyn about that same thing, but I can't say, I was talking with Beth and this, right? I can just say, I have a concern about what's going on. I don't mention my conversation with Beth, but I might talk about it with Kaylyn as well. That's still okay, right?
That's the last nuance to this, which is, so I really would prefer that you avoid collecting a quorum in your communications. That's serial communications by definition. So the other thing that you have to worry about is sharing each other's thoughts. And so how does that work? Beth talks to 6 of you and gathers all of your thoughts together, and she doesn't share with any of you what other people have told her. Okay, does that make sense? Then she calls Adriana and says, okay, I've talked to Christine, Natalie, Amy, Grace. Grace, are you on this? You're on this, right? No, you're not on this. Yeah, okay. Malia, Araceli, and Christy. Okay, and here's what each one of them have said. What do you think, Adriana? Do you see what's happened there? You've now taken 6 individual thoughts and collected them into one communication. So up until the point where Beth, sorry, Beth, you're just an easy target because you're the chair, so you got to take the heat, and you've been around long, so I know you won't do this. So to the point where Beth talked to each of you individually, that's not a problem. And as long as she wasn't sharing those thoughts and others' thoughts with you, again, not a problem. But as soon as she met with Adriana, either in person or on the phone, and shared everyone else's thoughts, that's a violation of the open meeting law. So I get that seems kind of, I get that it seems maybe out there. So if you have questions, please let us know. I'd rather help you up front than try to correct things on the back end. Does that make sense? Okay, I see heads nodding, so I'm going to presume we're doing all right. If we're not doing all right,
Yes,
Right.
and Neil, I do want to add that for all of our new members for the past 2 years that we've welcomed new members to the Zoning Advisory Committee, this topic in particular is included in all of my welcome to the ZAC chats.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yes.
Awesome. All right, cool.
Everyone's
Well, thank you
nodding
for-
their head because I would
Yes.
send very detailed text about how this works. Although, of course, you are our chief counsel, but I make sure that this is something that we touch on going into it in the event that members discuss things.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. Yeah, and well, I really appreciate that. That makes my life a lot easier. But maybe I can just skip this then. Are we good? Does everyone feel good? All right, I won't skip it. But I will say that, again, if you have questions, ask us. Be careful on electronics. That's my biggest thing. I can't say that enough. Texting and emails. Emails are the easiest one. The big case was the Board of Regents back in the day, and they were using fax machines and they did a vote via fax, literally. And the Nevada Supreme Court didn't care for that too much because obviously who's not there? The public. So we always want to include the public in all of our thoughts. And really that's the great thing about public comment, although sometimes they can get long. We're here to listen to the public. We're spending your taxpayers' money. They get to have a say, and we need to listen. Now, that being said, listening and following everything that they say are two different things. You're expected to follow the policies and regulations set up by the Board of Trustees and the superintendent, but we should still listen to our public and allow them the ability to comment, which is an important part of the agenda that we will always make sure is there. I should also mention before I go ahead there is so much more to the open meeting law that you all don't see going on behind the scenes but I don't want you to worry about that. We have staff in place that are handling that. We create agendas for you, which is on our memo. You cannot take action on items that are not on the agenda. They must be labeled as an action item. You cannot take action on this presentation. You can't say you hate it. If you want to say you like it, I might let you get away with that. Just kidding. So the point being is you cannot take action on anything that's not labeled as an action item. And we will provide you support material. And as part of providing support material, we make sure that the public has access to it the same time that you have access to it. We also have to post the agendas at 3 different locations as well as our place of business. So they're probably posted out at Adam's shop or with Lauren's shop as the liaisons, or as the liaison Lauren, or possibly Adam, because capital projects and deal with zoning the most operations. So there's all kinds of, and I could go on and on and on. I don't want to bore you. I want to stick to the topics that are important for you, but I just want you to know there's a lot that goes into this, and we are constantly working behind the scenes to make sure it happens. So when you read that, if you do decide to read the manual, again, I don't think you have to. There's a lot in there that you don't need to worry about. So we're trying to give you the highlights here when we talk about this. During the meeting, it's very, very important that you're concise in your comments and you stick to the agenda item. It is a violation of the open meeting law to go off the agenda topic because you didn't provide notice to other members of the public what you're going to talk about. We have to provide a notice to the public, which consists of your agenda, and that notice must be clear and complete, which, as Brian Sandoval, and I used to work for Brian at the AG's office, and our new university UNR president, he told me, he said, this is how I interpret that. He said, if the average guy's walking down the street, he needs to be able to look at it and know what you're going to do. So that's how I've always advised my public bodies. I've been doing this for too long, 12, I've been 22 years off and on. So just remember that we give a clear and complete agenda so that the average person on the street knows what this committee is going to do. So it's incumbent upon you as committee members to stay on that agenda and not go off on topics you want to talk about. You need to talk about what's on that agenda. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? And Beth is really good at reining folks in. And I see your light went off, Beth. Go ahead.
That's what I was going to say, is that sometimes we'll get into these domino conversations, but when we get a little bit too far from what would really be considered in terms of a vote or necessary discussion, I'll kind of rein that in so that we understand that we're getting a little bit off the path.
Yeah, and so you'll see me communicating with Beth, and I'll lean over to her and I'll say, hey, we're sliding off the agenda here, stick to the agenda. And so she'll interrupt, and please don't take that as being rude. It's just what we do, and we'll stop that conversation from going any further. So I think the last big part that I want to touch upon in the memo, and this is really not the open meeting law, but it's a public records issue, but it's related to the open meeting law, is that the courts have determined that if you do public business on electronic means, that is a public record. And the reason why I think it's related to the open meeting law is because, as we just discussed, you might be texting each other or emailing each other. We would really advise that you use email, number one, because this way your phone does not become a public record. If somebody requests your phone and you have school district business on your phone, then I will fight to keep it out of the public record, because that's my job. But there is a court case that just came out, it's a couple years old now, that is pretty clear. If you're doing public business on your phone, i.e. texting, that's a public record, those text messages. The other thing I want you to consider is that your email is also a public record. So I strongly suggest that you do not use your personal email. You don't want me going into chambers with a judge and a defense attorney, or excuse me, a plaintiff's attorney, and going through all of your emails and saying, this is not a public record, this is a public record. So we strongly advise to all of our volunteers that you create an email. There are several services that do them free. I'm not advertising here, but I know Gmail does one because I have one. I know Yahoo does one because I have one. I know that I believe there's Apple. I think if you sign up with AT&T, you can get a couple. So we had no charge. So I would strongly suggest that you maybe, I'll use Beth again. Beth might want to put Beth Zoning Committee at yahoo.com or whatever, Beth ZC, so that she knows any email that comes in and out of that email account will be related to the zoning committee. And it just creates a little cleaner record. It prevents us from going through your private personal things. You know, you might have medical stuff in there, or who knows. So it just makes it a little cleaner. So that's a strong recommendation. Again, thank you so much for volunteering. The board really relies upon your recommendations. We can't thank you enough. I hope this gave you some ideas and some things to think about. And do you have any questions?
Neil, I have one thing that I just wanted to clarify, because the emails are also in the welcome to the ZAC chat, but those members of the committee that already work for the district, or possibly UNR, since their emails are already subject to that kind of review and scrutiny, they don't need to generally create a second email, right?
Yeah, I guess I should have mentioned that. I didn't think about that. If you work for the district, your email's public already, so you don't have an issue. Anybody who's new, or anybody who, even if you're not new, but don't work for the district, I strongly suggest you just create a little account. I can say that there are members on other committees who work for corporations and other entities, and they're like, whoa, I didn't realize that. So they've all created private accounts. It's just good. You definitely do not, if you work for a private company, definitely do not use your company's email for this business, because that would be, I can't give you legal advice personally, but that would be bad. I'll just put it that way. So don't do that. Don't do that. But if you work for the district, it's no big deal.
Does anyone have any questions or anything we wanted to clarify?
Question. I'm using my company computer. Should I use my kid's computer instead for the next meeting?
No, I think with regard to computers, as long as you're in the cloud, it's not an issue, because the cloud moves with you as opposed to the computer, right? So as long as you're in the cloud using Google, or this is Zoom, and you're using it through whatever application you use it, I don't think that's the issue. The bigger issue when I say don't use the email is, let's say you work for Bank of America. Only reason why is that's just what came to mind. And so you work for Bank of America and you use your Bank of America email. And the next thing you know, somebody says, I want to do a public record request for the zoning committee emails as it relates to item 2. And sure enough, you have one on your Bank of America. More likely than not, that plaintiff's attorney is not going to be just satisfied with what you turned over. They're going to want to look at your system. And then, you don't want your Bank of America information that that could be confidential account holders or whatever getting public, right? So, plus that would create, that's litigation that I think I could win, but it's going to create an issue. So why do that, right? Okay, thank you guys so much. I think I get to present to you at least one more time, but thank you very much.
Thanks. All right, seeing no other discussion on that, we'll go ahead and we will close that agenda item 2.05 and move on to item 2.06, the presentation and discussion on the guiding principles of the Zoning Advisory Committee related to student safety, educational equity, and student achievement, while maintaining the existing school buildings, minimizing disruption to families, ensuring equitable access, and maintaining zoning changes ideally for 3 to 5 years. This item is for information and discussion only. And Lauren, who do we have guiding us on, or Neil, your previous presentation, did that include all of the board policies as well? Or is that after the guiding principles? Because I remember seeing that in our master deck.
I did not include the board policies. I presume that I'm going to talk about the board policies for this committee under this item. That was just the open meeting law.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right, Lauren, did you want me to take on a review of the guiding principles as they stand right now? Or we're starting with the board policy? Okay. Then in that case, I will welcome Chief Counsel Neil Rombardo.
Yeah, so I think there's two items that this committee should be most concerned with. Board Policy 7105 and Administrative Regulation 7107. I would strongly advise you to read those in their entirety and so you have an idea of what the district is looking to do. But if we could go back to Board Policy 7105, whose screen is this? Is this Lauren or Adam? Whoever, thank you. So looking at Board Policy 7105, this is where the district, and I should mention it's in NRS that zoning policies on zoning are required by law, and certain notices are required by law as it relates to zoning. And we do all those as well as the open meeting law for the committee, just so you know. And here in Board Policy 7105, you basically have what the board has laid out as its school and attendance zones. And I'd like to direct you to page 2, sub 2D, which there it says the district shall consider several factors when creating school attendance zones and or rezoning of current school attendance zones. Number 1, the safety of students. 2, the proximity of students to an individual school. 3, the impact student demographic changes will have on existing educational programs within each school affected. 4, availability of space. 5, transportation issues. 6, timing of planned facility expansions or new facility construction. 7, growth impact as determined by the number and location of approved but unbuilt subdivisions. And 8, capacity and enrollment of the school to be optimized and the schools in the area affected by the optimization process. So these are the things that the board has set out for itself to consider. And I think it would be appropriate for this committee to also look at some of these standards when it makes its decision, although that wasn't specifically stated in the reg. I will tell you that I do intend on working with Superintendent McNeil and the staff liaison, Lauren Ford, Adam Searcy, and Beth on reworking some of these policies and regs. Unfortunately, I've been stuck with couple other issues lately, but this is on the agenda for me to look at. So I'd like to bring some consistency between letter D and the other findings that I'm going to suggest to you that's in the Administrative Regulation 7107. But I think it's my understanding from talking to Lauren that this committee in the past had adopted some of these principles. And I want to be clear that it's great that you can have whatever you desire, but really what the district is looking for is that you follow 7105 and Admin Reg 7107. And from what I could see on that last slide, there's definitely some consistency here, right? Safety, overcrowding, those type of things, transportation. So those are the type of topics that you should be, items that you should be looking at to make your decision. And that's what I would strongly encourage. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you looking at this policy is letter or number 3B, and how an item gets to the zoning committee. And so really the zoning committee is how it works, and what the trigger is that the staff liaison working with Adam and Adam's folks in operations will trigger the agenda items that come forth to this committee through one of the four instances laid out in 3B. So construction of a new school, closing of a school or suspending operations at a school. Perhaps we're building something on site, we need to suspend operations, we might need to do a quick rezone. Rezoning to relieve overcrowded schools and fill less crowded schools, and then vertical alignment and grade configuration of schools, which we spent, for those members who are here last year, we spent a lot of time on vertical configuration, and I think you all did a heck of a job of, I think this, I will tell you, this is one of my favorite committees. I hope my other committee members aren't watching, but you guys are fun to work with and a good group, and you really give a lot of thought. And those new members, you have a big shoes to fill, and I'm sure you can do it. And so in looking at all of this, what the board said is that they want a zoning advisory committee. That was easy for me to say. They want a zoning advisory committee because they want to hear from the public, and this is their way to have public input on them adopting zones for the schools. So what happens in the school district is we create policies which are equivalent to our laws, and that's what Adam has on the screen here. And then what we do is we adopt regulations, which is regulation 7107. If we can flip over to that. And we adopt regulations to kind of further establish how we're going to carry out that board policy. And so for the zoning committee, there's actually a really nice section in 7107 that I want to take you to. It's on page 4, number 4, Zoning Advisory Committee. And you were established by the Board of Trustees, so that's a mistake, that first sentence. You are a public body of the Board of Trustees, and you make recommendations to the Board of Trustees, so that'll be fixed in our rewrite. The district is required to provide you information. That's the little bullet point 1 there, or I. And the 2 I's, the committee will review target enrollment recommendations by staff and develop options based on the following parameters. So here's how this works. And here's what we're laying out here in this regulation is staff's going to come to you and they're going to say, here's our demographics, which Adam and Randy provide all those great maps with all the great colors and all the lines, and to the point where there's lines moving and colors changing, and it's really really well done and quite awesome to watch. And the fact that you guys can keep up with it is very impressive to me, because I can't, frankly. So how it works is they come with the demographics and they share it with you, and they share whatever other data they think is pertinent, such as there's going to be a new housing development here, or this housing development, although there's 100 units, there's no children, no school-age students. Then staff will also provide you with our target enrollment numbers for each school. And at that point, the committee takes over, and the committee should look at the following things: keeping subdivisions and small neighborhood units in the same attendance zones to the extent possible. Now, keep in mind, to the extent possible. So this is a balancing test. You can't meet all 6 all the time, or is there 7? Yeah, all 6. You can't meet all 6 all the time. So you have to weigh these and decide what is more important for you. And you each get your own individual point of view, but really in my mind, this is the roadmap for you right here. The board policy, but really this is it, these 6 things. So you're looking at keeping subdivision and small neighborhood units in the same attendance zones to the extent possible. Assign students to the closest schools to the extent possible. Create compact attendance zones with few or no island areas. Include target enrollments that allow for growth and anticipated changing demographics. Comply with feeder patterns to the extent possible. That's our vertical alignment that we talked about. Avoid placing a transportation burden on any identifiable diversity subgroup. And so those are the things that you're looking at. Now, I do think you should probably get yourself acquainted with the rest of Administrative Regulation 7107, because there is some good things in here that you should know, such as if a student is in his or her senior year, they don't have to leave if the school, if the zone's realigned. We hear a lot of that. My students in their senior year, it's not fair. Why do I have to move from Galena to Damani Ranch? Well, you don't. And we have that in our regulations, right? A student who's a 6th grader, same thing, depending on the school, K through 6 or K through 5, 5th grader, et cetera. I think you get the point. So I just think these are good things to remember. Also down here on page 5C, it talks about your membership. So I should have got, that was 13 members because I have this highlighted. I apologize for that. Talks about your criteria. So it has some pretty good suggestions on how this committee should run. And I think this regulation is good. And I'm going to work with the superintendent and the appropriate folks and Beth, your chair, to make it better. But these, I think the most important part about this is these guidelines found in 4A are really your guiding documents that the board wants you to consider when you make your recommendations to them. And as I mentioned in my last presentation, the board takes your recommendations very seriously. In fact, I can't recall a time where the board didn't follow this committee, maybe once. Beth, you probably had once, right? Yeah, okay. I do remember that now.
Yeah, with the board member that's no longer with us, but yes, one time.
Yes. Nonetheless, this committee is very well respected, as are all our committees, but your advice or your recommendations are held in high regard. So it's important that you consider the factors that the board is asking you to consider. So I hope that this helps clarify things. I've been wanting to talk to you all about this policy and regulation for a while. I think we just kind of missed each other over the last year or two since we've been working together. And the more I dig into this, the more I think that this is the place to be for all of you and the things that you should know as committee members. So do you have any questions, or is there anything else I can add or anything?
Well, you know, Neil, what immediately comes to mind for me, which was the main thing we were hoping to discuss and possibly change, because there feels like a little bit of duplication, and that's the guiding principles that our committee has. So Dr. LaMarca had the Zoning Advisory Committee create its own guiding principles, which align to these board policies, but really rephrase them, if you will, into a different voice, but still related. And that's also in this agenda item. But I wonder what role that really has compared to the board policies that we have here, and what your thoughts are, because several of our new members, not just this year, but also last year, when we have those up on the screen, have noticed that there is some redundancy in some of them. We have 6. So what is your advice about these guiding principles? Should we steer more closely to the board policies that we have? What role do you think those guiding principles have versus the actual board policies? Because I know we can't change the board policies without their approval, but the guiding principles were our own from 2017. So how do these all play together, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, boy, that's pretty, yes, okay. That's a tough, I don't mean to be, what I would like to do is take your guiding principles and share them with the superintendent and add them into your regulation to the point that there is an inconsistency. And I'd be happy to suggest to the superintendent that this is a very active group who wants to be a part of this, and maybe we bring these things back for you to look at. But honestly, I wasn't working with Paul then, so I don't know what happened. So I don't want to say, I don't want to blame anyone, but really those, your own adopted guiding principles have no meaning. You don't have that authority. That's not delegated to you. What's delegated to you is what's in these documents. And that sounds harsh, and I don't mean it to, but we
No,
can't.
it doesn't sound harsh.
Okay.
I think that this is very clarifying, if anything, because with our new members, both last year and this year, bringing attention to certain things, like, for example, 2 and 5 sound a lot alike with the guiding principles. Could that possibly be a little bit more concise and clear? And then the same thing with 4 and 6.
Okay.
Particularly with 5, we have this big spelled out sentence, but what the phrase we often use is neighborhood kids and neighborhood schools. And so I've had lots of members say, is there an opportunity to revisit this and maybe freshen them up a bit? Because back in 2017, when we created them, it was a very different time and we were all very new to all of this. And like you explaining this now, I think we understood these guiding principles to be different than really what they actually are.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways they almost not compete, because I do believe that they are in tandem with the policies, but the policy is really where the meat is. And so we don't want to create that confusion. So I think if there's an opportunity to make sure that even those policies were created a long time ago when we were just getting ourselves off the ground, if there's an opportunity to maybe refine that now that we're in our 4th year as a committee, I think that that would be great. I know that we're not taking anything for action, but that's just some thoughts to clarify what the policies do for this committee versus what those guiding principles do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And here's because you're one of my boards, and I do most of the boards, but I do have 2 attorneys that work with me. My colleagues, they have some boards as well, but I do plan on, as I stated, I want to clean up this. I think zoning is important, and I want to get this cleaned up for you. So I think we would be happy to listen to you and take into account some of these guiding principles, possibly for the administrative regulation. But as of right now, I appreciate you saying that we really want to stick to 7107 and 7105. And if we can use those in making our decisions, then I think that we can't be challenged by really anybody in the community who wants to claim that we did something wrong, which is when people want to be litigious, they're listening to what you say, and what you say is important. So it needs to be consistent with the rules that we've laid out for you. So, but I hear you, and we will fix it.
Beth,
Oh,
sorry, Adriana, go ahead.
So thank you, Kaylyn. I believe that these guiding principles came about as an attempt to synthesize 7105 and 7107, the guidance that we have, those 2 documents, in a shorthand that was useful for our meetings, because we have to think on our feet and make decisions pretty quickly. So I think if they could be revised to be a little more true to the original, or even reference the originals, that would be really helpful for us. Because having both documents in front of us during a meeting to try to, reference back to, this is the really important guiding principle that we need to stick to in this case, I think is just a little bit cumbersome. So I think there's value in having some sort of cheat sheet, right, for us to all be able to refer to and to speak to the community about. But I don't think these current principles quite do that yet. So I think that's just what we're asking for, what you're saying that you're going to do, which is talk to Dr. McNeil about how what we're doing and saying and how we're going is really true to the original docs, without having to have these documents in front of us every meeting.
Yeah, okay. Well, I did not understand that it was a cheat sheet. The problem is if you call them guiding principles, we have some board policy draftsmanship that includes terms such as guiding principles. So it almost sounds like you're trying to supersede, and I don't want to give that impression to the public. So we need to, maybe we can figure out a way to distill your guiding principles to be more like 7107, and you can bullet point it any way you want, really, if that's what your desire is. But we should note that they're based off of 7107.
I think maybe more of a vision statement might be something that's you could still use the policies as the guiding principles. I know you have a mission statement on the zoning committee website, but maybe a vision statement could be a place where you're not going against those principles, but it also puts in the committee's voice a little bit. Might be a good alternative without double dipping into the policy. Just as an idea.
Beth, I don't know if this is Araceli Martinez. From what I recall and what I could tell was that those were not necessarily any policies that we were going off of. Those were just values and things that the committee, when we started, was what we were wanting to see and taking into consideration. It wasn't a cheat sheet that I'm aware of or anything like that, but it was more of how are we going to give priority to what things when they come up and ensure that we can include most of those values and important things that we came up with. But it wasn't necessarily a cheat sheet or based solely on the policy. It was just more of our values and how we can guide ourselves, more of a guidance for ourselves, not necessarily for going back to the policy, but more for ourselves. But and maybe you can chip in on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how Dr. Lamarca originally brought it up, because anyone that's ever served on the zoning advisory committee has never done anything like this before. And of course, that was also true the very first year. And so Dr. Lamarca brought it to us as an agenda item that said one of the tasks we have to do is distill down to these values. And they're not in necessarily numeric order, so they're all weighted the same. But to your point, Neil, we can't always accomplish all of them, but there are guiding principles, there's value there. But the part that I'm concerned about is that they may inadvertently compete with the policies which we're actually held to. And so how this all came about was because so many of you have said, I think we should revisit this, and I absolutely agree we should revisit it. But then it became very sticky about passing new guiding principles. And that's where Neil got involved and said, well, we really need to understand what the scope of this is. But Araceli, you're definitely right. That's exactly the way that it was brought to us. These are our values. This was more of a distilled version of what it is that we're keeping in mind. They align with those board policies, but they're also a little bit different too. And we refer to them all the time. Neighborhood kids in neighborhood schools, weighing things on 3 to 5 years. That is one of the policies. So I think, Neil, we'll probably look to you for guidance on really where you think that this fits. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're not creating any confusion between what the guiding principles do for us versus what the board policies do. So if it would be possible, I know that this is not an item for action, but something for consideration would be having your team decide what you feel comfortable having a committee use to guide it in its decisions.
Yeah, well, I think I can answer that right now. I really would like you to stick to the administrative regulation, and if we need to work in the guiding principles as you have adopted them. And again, I can't speak about what happened 3 years ago. So it is what it is. It's out there. But this committee is supposed to be looking at those factors in 7107, and I do think it's appropriate to at least consider the factors the board will consider in 7105, and they're consistent anyway. So we don't tend to have public bodies, volunteer public bodies, create their own guiding principles, because then people would, could go off and do whatever they want. But we can draft a vision statement. We could work on making your guiding principles consistent with 7107, I think those would be the answers. That's my take. But to the extent that they're inconsistent, from my perspective, they're void. I don't mean to sound rude. You don't have that authority.
No, this is good. This is absolutely good. And I think we can still meet the request to take a review of what those policies are and what it is we're saying. So we can still accomplish the goal of so many of the requests, and we can still also refocus on the policies themselves. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that this is a clear path with achieving what our ultimate goal is, which is taking our years of experience and our new voices and providing a refined policy and approach going forward.
Yeah.
And I think at the beginning, I don't think we saw them as a policy. It was just more of values that this committee is working under, not necessarily just a policy that we had to follow or a set in stone policy or creating new policies. I don't think that was the intention. So definitely guided by the actual policies.
I want to be clear. I don't think anybody had bad intentions. It seems like a good idea. Just, we got to make sure we are consistent with these. So if I made it sound that way, I apologize.
So is there any more question on this topic or any more discussion? No? All right, seeing no discussion, we'll go ahead and close item 2.06 and move on to item 2.07, information and discussion of the forecasted building plan for the 2020-21 school year and beyond from the Washoe County School District Capital Projects Department. This is an item for information and discussion only. And we welcome for the first time this committee year, Chief Facilities Officer Adam Searcy.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you, Beth. For everybody new, welcome. Thanks for your time and initiative. It is a fun committee. We've done a lot of great things over the last several years and done a lot of great things for our overcrowded schools. So I'll kind of open with that expression of gratitude. I am going to kind of speak to some of the newer members a little bit with the information that I provide here, just sort of as an overview. When we typically get into topics, as Neil mentioned, we'll talk about very specific enrollment projections and detailed maps of neighborhoods and stuff like that. We'll get very granular and dense, but for the purposes of this evening, it's kind of a high-level overview summary and then an open discussion if you guys want to talk about one thing or another. So kind of to start, I'll share my screen again, and you should all have this information, but I wanted to present this graphic really to try and illustrate the timeline, the projected timeline of our long-term capital improvements plan. And I'll break this down a little bit more detail, but just this one-page graphic tries to illustrate really some of these major capital projects, these new schools that we have constructed and opened, and the zoning committee has been a part of nearly each and every one of these as we have addressed the impacts of opening these new schools, right? So just sort of thinking about these students that are overcrowded, packed into their current schools, we open a new school and then redistribute those students into the new school. And there's a series of cascading effects oftentimes. So you are familiar likely with the Desert Skies Middle School, Sky Ranch Middle School, Pulikitas Elementary School. All three of those have been open for a full school year now. We also completed the Demonte Ranch High School expansion. Just a month or so ago, we finally opened the Bohatch Elementary School in Spanish Springs and the Marcy Hers Middle School up in Arrow Creek. So really positive developments, extensive conversations and meetings with the zoning committee to establish zoning boundaries for those new schools as well. What we're going to be talking about a bit this committee year is resolving the cascading impacts stemming from the Michael Inskeep Elementary School, as it's called now, previously referred to as the Cold Springs area elementary school up in the north end of Cold Springs. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that's under construction as we speak. That's a pretty recent photo, and it's on schedule to open for students in August 2021. Up here for 2022, we've got really 3 major projects scheduled to open, all under construction as we speak. The new Proctor Hug High School, most of you should be familiar with that. It's been under development for several years. It's actively under construction right now and will represent a new high school in the Wild Creek area. The zoning committee has previously discussed and taken action, and that action was approved by the Board of Trustees to define the enrollment zones for the new high school at Wild Creek, the new Proctor Hug High School at Wild Creek. The next 2 projects here below this one, the Swope Middle School expansion and upgrades is under construction as we speak. That's a project that will allow the school district to bring the 6th graders up into Swope Middle School from all the elementary schools that feed that middle school. So we talk about this, or have talked about this quite a bit in years past, is trying to get all of the 6th graders into middle school along with the 7th and 8th graders. In the past, some of our schools, whether they were intended to be housing only 7th and 8th graders, or whether the enrollment levels have just caused that to be the impact. Going forward, it has been the intention of the school board to have a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade model for middle school. That's what our new middle schools are accommodating. And in many instances, we are able to accommodate 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in our middle schools without modifications. In the case of Swope Middle School, we were not. And so because of a variety of other factors, mild overcrowding at the elementary school level, who maybe still house 6th graders, we've moved forward with the expansion of Swope to modernize Swope in many ways and expand its capacity so as to allow us to bring the 6th graders up to middle school, thereby relieving some of the overcrowding at the elementary school level there. So that's really not necessarily something that will require action of the zoning committee, that those elementary school boundaries can remain as they are currently, just having that enrollment relief by virtue of bringing the 6th graders up to middle school. That's kind of really what's going on there. All of that work is in progress and on pace to be completed in time for the August 2022 start of that school year. And then somewhat along the same lines, but with a different solution being proposed, the O'Brien Middle School up in Stead is being designed to be reconstructed rather than expanded and remodeled. We're actually going to build a new middle school on the same campus and basically flip the campus front to back. So that, I'll spare you the details on the construction, but what that's going to do is allow us to have the capacity at middle school to bring 6th graders up into middle school out of the elementary schools and create additional capacity at those elementary schools. So that does play into some of the work that the committee has in front of it this year. But again, all of these projects on pace for a 2022 completion and really are in motion, significant motion already. Moving into 2023 forecast, really we're looking at the Debbie Smith Career and Technical Education Academy. If you're not familiar with that relatively recently named project, this is the former or current, technically today, Hug High School campus. Once the new Hug High School is completed and opened over at Wild Creek in 2022, we will vacate this campus at the old Hug High and begin repurposing it, reconstructing it, remodeling it into a career and technical academy to open in August 2023. So I'll touch on that a little bit later. That one is essentially an open enrollment format. So rather than drawing discrete zoning boundaries, it's actually going to be by application of students available to them from across the district. So I'll talk about this later. We try to take that into consideration in our forecasts, but the punchline for this committee is that there's not action required of the Zoning Advisory Committee to open the Debbie Smith CTE Academy by August 2023. So these ones are in some form of construction, current projects in orange. But then looking forward into the future, you see everything else labeled in green. And really the asterisk associated with them is at the bottom here. All future schools are growth dependent. And that is where we get into the forecasting of what is going to happen in the future. And I don't know about you guys, but I've been struggling a bit with telling exactly what the future will hold these days. It's been quite a wild ride. So we're going to talk about what is in the current plans, and we'll not make any firm predictions. But in the nearest term, the Rio Wrangler area elementary school is an area in the South Meadows, sort of in between Demonte Ranch High School and Brown Elementary School. The school district owns a property, a parcel of land over there, and we have long forecasted the need for an additional elementary school there. And so we're poised to deliver that project when the circumstances dictate. And that is going to be a decision of the superintendent and the board of trustees. And so really we will continue to deliberate that with those groups, and the zoning committee will take action accordingly, following their lead, really is what that means. And that's really going to be the case for the rest of this stuff. Growth will motivate the operations department to make recommendations to the superintendent and board of trustees to proceed on some of these potential projects to address the demands associated with growth. And then should those projects be approved to go forward into design and construction, that's when, they would essentially go orange, right, for the purposes of this graphic. And the zoning committee would likely then be engaged to resolve the pending impacts of the construction and opening of these new schools. So some interesting ones on the far end listed in green. We can talk about them. They are in our long-term forecast, but they are very long-term. Many of them are only studies or scoped, projects that we've just crudely scoped for their viability, may or may not come to fruition. So that's kind of the quick overview of this single slide. I wanted to spend a little bit of time, though, going through the next several pages on the 20-year facilities plan. This is a pretty dense document that we put together and ran through the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency back through most of 2019. It was just recently approved by them, that body, as well as our board of trustees. This document goes through a lot of different elements of the facilities department, but I wanted to just show you a couple of highlights. The first couple pages here really talk about the projections or forecasting. For the summary of this group, the three main areas to be aware of, and this shouldn't come as a surprise to you really, are the South Meadows, Demonte Ranch area, Spanish Springs, and the North Valleys area, whether it be Cold Springs or Lemon Valley areas. Again, it should come as no surprise to anyone in this community that those are the areas of greatest forecasted growth in the school district in the next 20 years. But the pages here on this PDF, 45 through 49, 43 through 49, go into a moderate level of detail of how we go about generating these enrollment forecasts. It's interesting, somewhat complex, but ultimately comes into a great deal of significance as we talk about our enrollment forecasts. We spend a great deal of time engaging with other entities on what the building plans are, what the nature of those projects entail, and then also a great deal of time analyzing our own data and trying to forecast empirically. Here's what it looked like over the last 5 years, each year. What is the average rolling trends going forward, and trying to make projections based off of empirical data. So just a summary, it's already dated because the world has changed dramatically since this was published, but it gives you a structural understanding of where the numbers come from. When we do present them to you, I think that's important, at least for our new members, to understand kind of the foundation that comes behind these numbers, because they are richly discussed. So fast forwarding here, page 59 of the packet. This table 3 in the 20-year facilities plan is basically a verbal or a tabular summary of the one-page graphic that I started talking from. Right, so these are basically the same projects in similar time scale broken down, so you can just get a little bit more color or understanding of kind of when we on the one-page graphic say long-term future, this breaks it down kind of into a medium range and a long range, but they should basically all still be on there. So that's just another way of looking at that. Wanted to also fast forward a couple more pages here. The rest of the document largely goes through the entire school district kind of by region or area. So on this page 66 of the master document for this evening, we'll talk just a second on the North Valleys area. A lot going on up here, including the future elementary school location, now and forevermore known as the Michael Inskeep Elementary School, depicted by this red star up at the top of Cold Springs. But you know, it's worth noting we've got existing schools, of course, on this graphic, but we've also got a little star down here for O'Brien Middle School. It says potential future expansion. Okay, so that's part of our plan. And then we've also kind of over here to the right or the east, it says future elementary school locations. So you'll see that referred to in a couple of other places, but that's a parcel of land that has been master planned with a developer into their future community that the school district owns and is very much a part of our medium and long range plans to address future growth in this area. So you also see some clouded areas referring to potential future locations. And the reason they're clouded is because we don't actually own parcels at this time. We put stars on them if we have an official ownership of a property. The cloud basically is intended to depict the fact that there is not a parcel owned by the school district, but that future schools in these vicinities are addressed and identified in this plan pending growth, right? So many of you are familiar with the proposed development in the Cold Springs area known as Stonegate. We've been in discussions with them for several years now to master plan not only potentially multiple elementary schools into their community, but also a high school potentially in the Stonegate community. That is entirely growth dependent, but it is specifically identified in this long-term plan. Going forward on these pages, it gets into a little bit more detail, just sort of narrating through how we see the growth of the North Valleys, the enrollment developments, the approximate existing enrollment levels at these schools, and what the future may hold for them. So we don't, what we often do is show, okay, here's the existing enrollment levels at these schools and what the future holds. But then what we often do is propose solutions. And that you don't really see that in this document. When we get into addressing specific impacts, we'll show you that data. But for example, North Valley's high school up here at the top is, rather full today, and certainly going to be feeling the impacts of growth going forward through the end of the 2020s and beyond. The plan for that essentially is a new high school in the Cold Springs area. But we're not specific in this document as to when that may occur, or really any additional level of specificity. But the intent of this document is to demonstrate, hey, here's kind of the overview, the forecast, high level forecast, and then here's several key elements of how we see the future transpiring for this area of the school district. Okay, and here again is kind of the narrative associated with this area. Construct a new elementary school off of Sky Vista Parkway in the Southern Stead area. That's one of those stars that I referred to. And then you've got some clouded stuff. Future schools within the Stonegate development, future school possibly in the Silver Knolls area. Those are not sites that we own, but those are developments that are proposed residential developments that we're working with the developer on to master plan schools and position ourselves to address the needs of enrollment growth when and if they occur. All right. It's a lot of talking. I'm going to take a breath and see if there's any questions while I move on to page 89 of this graphic. This is in reference mostly to the W. Smith CTE Academy. All right, so this is a graph that illustrates the zoned enrollment for all of the students currently attending our other career and technical academy in the school district, AACT. So as you can see, students from all across the district open enroll into AACT. And when we've talked about projected high school enrollments in the past, we've often explained to the committee that what we try to do is take this same distribution of students across all various different high school zones and apply that to the future W. Smith. So if there's 16% of the kids that go to AACT today are technically zoned for Reed, then we're building into our model, our forecast, that 16% of the future students at W. Smith Career and Technical Academy will also come from Reed. It's crude, but it's the best we can do to at least account for the impacts of opening W. Smith CTE in 2023. There will be students from all across the district in significant number choosing to enroll in that high school, and that will also abate that existing overcrowding at many of those schools. Okay, so just flipping back to where we started, kind of trying to take us full circle. I think that gives you a pretty good, or that's close to all I wanted to say, to really talk about the green stuff, the future projects, and recognizing again that all of these are subject to direction or approval of the superintendent, the board of trustees, and another committee similar to yours known as the Capital Funding Protection Committee. These are all growth dependent, and as I mentioned earlier, we're really all having a heck of a time telling what tomorrow, much less the long-term future, is going to bring. So I wanted to kind of refer you all a bit to the Board of Trustees meeting actually next week. So next Tuesday, we have a board meeting every other Tuesday. And on this board agenda, which has been published today, there's an item related to enrollment and basically discussing the fact that the school district this year is seeing a decreased level of enrolled students. And that has a variety of impacts. And there's going to be discussion, financial discussion, demographic discussion. The majority of that decrease is actually in the kindergarten grade, things like that. So all that stuff is posted. But what that does, I think, for this committee, it's great information for you to familiarize yourself with, and I would encourage you to listen to or participate in the board meeting next week. But really what I think the point I'm trying to make for this committee is that we, staff at the school district and the board of trustees, are really closely monitoring the enrollment patterns as they are developing and changing due largely to the COVID pandemic, and are really in a tenuous position to make or take action related to growth at this time. All right, so all this green, the Rio Wrangler Elementary School, other elementary schools or school projects in the future are likely to see pause when it comes to approvals to proceed because of the uncertainty and the dramatic fluctuation in trends. When we rely on empirical trends from past years over time, and we're seeing those trends being dramatically disrupted right now, it's just a very uncertain time and a time of volatility in the data that this committee uses and that the facilities department uses to try and make recommendations on moving forward. So that's kind of the summary of what the current, immediate future and longer term future looks like. I could go on and on and on and on and on, but it's already been quite enough. I will open it up for questions and discussion and stop talking. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Beth Smith for the record. Staying on this slide, one thing that I wanted to clarify for the community and then a question for you. So something that is great to point out here is that traditionally this committee tends to work a full school year out. That means that over the course of our committee year and 2020 going into 2021, we would be making recommendations for adoption by the Board of Trustees, and then usually a full school year still happens at that point, so that there's usually a full school year's notice, not changes that are happening going into the following school year. So just so everyone understands that that's traditionally the cadence. I recognize that we're going to have some items on our agenda that are a bit different. That's impacted due to the current coronavirus pandemic, but traditionally we work a full school year out so that families have notice. And the question I have for you, and maybe you could share, is that how long does a project usually take to actually come to fruition once it's actually greenlit? So for example, the Rio Wrangler area elementary school, we've got that 23 to 25 range. At what point does the Board of Trustees, when they give their okay, and it takes maybe 2 years to build a school after that, what's that timeline look like?
Yeah, 2 years is going to be a good rule of thumb. Based on the size of the school, it takes longer kind of thing. So 18 months is a little closer to reality for an elementary school. The high school is going to take more than 24 months to build from start to finish. But 2 years is a good rule of thumb just from the start of construction. And then we're talking about a good 12 to 18 months on average for once the project's fully approved to go into design as well. So it does take quite a bit of time before they open. And then of course, we try really hard, traditionally always only open schools in August. So there's a limited window there. Once you reach a certain point in the year, you're already kicked to the next school year because you're not opening the school in October, unless something really bad has happened. But that's a great point. And I should also admit, if I could expand on that, Beth, that trying to make decisions a year in advance of the opening, we're gonna fall short of that goal a tad on the Inskeep one. Some of those impacts from the opening of that Michael Inskeep Elementary School were approved by the board last year, and the communities affected are aware of that, but we didn't quite get the approval on another portion of that. So we're going to see that likely later this committee year and make hopefully get action from the board and notify those communities later this calendar year, well in advance of the start of the 2021 school year, but just shy of that full year's notice.
Thank you very much, Adam. Does anyone have any questions? I know it's quite a bit of content, but does anyone have any clarifying questions?
I just have a comment, Adam, or Adriana Publico for the record. Adam, I want to thank you and Randy and your team for putting together such a comprehensive packet for us. I know it wasn't for us, but this is so useful for our work, and you guys are so good at using graphics and narrative to represent the information so that all of us can really use it to make decisions. And while the world has definitely changed since this was created, it's important for us to know kind of what's in the pipeline, what properties are owned by the school district, what bandwidth we have to work with. So thank you and your team for all the effort that you put into this and for presenting it so well.
Yeah, thank you. That reminded me of just one other public piece of information that I wanted to share here. If I could reshare my screen. This is the public face of the WCSD building website. So really, if you just go to washoeschools.net, the school district's homepage, on the top banner, you'll see this building button. Clicking on that will take you to the building homepage. And all of the information that I've presented here tonight and much, much more is available here on all of these individual projects, our capital renewal, you know, the new roofs and stuff that we do to existing schools. And then kind of down at the bottom, we have the 20-year facilities plan and the, I'm not positive where the link is to the one-page graphic that I showed, but here, I think it's on right here, capital projects timeline, this guy. So all this stuff is all available publicly and much more. So to your point, Adriana, if anybody wants to take a deep dive into what's going on in school district facilities, and this is a great place to start right here at the school district's homepage. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or anything that someone? Go ahead.
With this being a census year, are any of the results of the census going to affect or change any of your projections?
I'm not certain that we take much census data into consideration. It's much more aligned with housing data and actual home construction numbers, as well as how many students those homes generate. But we do draw from a wide range of data sources. So when that data is available, it likely will help inform our model. There's lots of points of data that come in, even including birth rates, to try and forecast what kindergarten classes will look like 5 years into the future. So that's a good point. Thank you.
Thanks, Malia. And for the record, that was Malia Pukta. Any other questions? No? All right, hearing no questions, we'll go ahead and we'll close item 2.07. Thank you so much, Adam, for that. It was really, really helpful. And we will open item 2.08. That's the information and discussion of the anticipated cadence of committee work, including the potential timeline for high school rezoning and other rezoning needs for the 2020-21 school year, including any requests from the Board of Trustees. This is an item for information and discussion only. And we will welcome Adam. Will you be covering this, or Lauren?
I think we're going to let Lauren get her feet wet on this one.
Thank you, Adam. So based on Adam's projections and the difficulty with predicting some of the projections that we see, he stated like a pause during this uncertainty time that we have right now with enrollment. Of course, tonight is our September meeting, which we have listed here. October, we're going to have consideration of zoning changes stemming from the new elementary school in Cold Springs. November, we have consideration of zoning actions as necessary. And then December, we have to be determined. So depending on how things roll out with October and November, we'll see if we need to continue and how we need to continue. Adam, did you want to add anything?
I would mention that at this time, the superintendent has directed that all committees of the board to conduct their meetings via Zoom until further notice. So while the Board of Trustees has convened meetings in person, public meetings in person, for good reason, there's a balance to that. There's pros and cons to that. And it's been the position taken by the school district that until further notice, all of our meetings, for better or worse, will be conducted via Zoom. So that's a thing. Public input is incredibly important. It's certainly accommodated through this means, but it definitely has a different feel and changes the nature of the meetings. I'd also just like to put out there for discussion the fact that this uncertainty is related to the enrollment levels, which largely drives our decision making, but it really has affected all aspects of all of our lives. And there's no denying that. And anybody who's been a part of a zoning advisory committee meeting can attest that this topic is inherently emotional and oftentimes very stressful, and that we are going to want to be very thoughtful about which areas we open up for discussion during this incredibly stressful time for all of us. So I just kind of throw that out there as a general statement. When we are working through what work needs to be done this committee year, we talked about remaining actions associated with the new school in Cold Springs as something that we really do need to accomplish. There may well be other areas of interest and concern that we'll want to discuss, and would just urge that it be tempered with the realities of the entire community at this time.
Adam. Something that I'll add to this, just so that it's clear for the community and to the committee, that we will be taking up the item based on the zoning changes stemming from the new elementary school in Cold Springs, and that is the potential continuation into November. So while we do not know if there would be a recommendation coming out of that October meeting, if we do not have a recommendation, that's exactly what would be carrying over to that November timeframe. So until we actually get into the topic, review what the options are, engage with the community, it's not possible to know how many months that will take. But this committee has an excellent reputation of making sure that we are very thorough and listen to the community and ultimately pass recommendations when we feel that they're ready. So I want to explain that at the current moment, we wouldn't be introducing new topics in between those months. It would be a continuation if we find ourselves in that situation into November. We would not be taking on new topics at this time. And then I will also plug for those of you, now that we do know that the March audio is up, that would be a great opportunity for a refresher on that. If you would like to see where that conversation last landed, that's largely what we'll be picking up with next month. Are there any questions about the cadence or how we go about at least this? Again, it's a very unusual year. Normally in a first meeting, we would have a whole docket of topics and areas that we would be getting into and forecasting. But to Adam's point, we really want to be very sensitive to the community. And in light of the fact that it's very uncertain, we're just going to be focusing on top needs at the moment. Are there any questions on this? No? All right, seeing no questions, we'll go ahead and we'll close item 2.08. Thank you so much, Lauren and Adam. And that'll bring us to section 3, our closing items. And at this point, I would like to ask if we have any public comment that has come in over the course of the meeting or to close out. Kendall?
There's no public comment at this time.
Very good. So we'll go ahead and we will close that and move on to item 3.02. That's the announcement of our next meeting. It will be Thursday, October 15th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. The format will be through this virtual format again, so it will not be in person. And then normally I have a gavel. I don't have one here. So 3.03, we will adjourn the meeting.